Hi, today we're going to show you how to maximize profit by optimizing production through the use of Excel Solver. We are going to do this through a simplified example. Now the example is extra simple so we can get the mechanics down. And in our simplified example, we have a company that makes mice, keyboards, and USB hubs. And we're going to assume that we know the following about each of these items. We know the profit per unit. That is, for every mouse that we sell, we make $13.10, etc. We know the labor hours per unit. We know the time on the production floor that it takes up per unit. And we know the monthly demand for these. Maybe we got those numbers from sales. Now, our job is to maximize profit, but we're given certain constraints. And if you're wondering if this applies to you, if you're in a different industry, maybe you can think of an example that's ubiquitous. I want to know which IT enhancements I can make to maximize ROI, but I'm given constraints. Maybe I only have so many programmers and I have deadlines that I need to finish it by. In our example, we have three constraints. We have the available monthly labor hours, which is 10,000. We have only 1,700 hours of production time. And we want to make sure that we don't exceed demand. We don't want finished goods sitting in our inventory that can't be sold. So as I go through this example, I want to keep this here and I want to show you some best practices on building the spreadsheet. So let's do this together and then I'll show you how to use the Excel solver. The first thing you want to do is you want to set up your objective function. So we're going to do that in two lines. First of all, I'm going to write in the production units and this is monthly, okay? So monthly production units, and I'm just going to type in what we have to start. 12,000, 20,000, and 9,000. Now I'm doing this because I don't want to mess up my original thing then. I want to leave it there. Okay, now we're ready to calculate profit. I'll call this actually total, I'll call this monthly profit. Okay, and this is just my profit per unit. This is just equal to my profit per unit times the number of units that I've sold. Okay, and let's pretty that up just a little bit. There we go. And this is going to be the same for all of these. Whoops, let me drag this across. Okay, so it's the same for all of these. Now, if I total this, I'll use a column here called my totals here. If I total this, I'm going to total production isn't that interesting, but what the heck, we'll put it in there anyway. I'm going to sum all these. All right, and here is my profit that I've got there. Again, I'm going to put that in dollars so I can see that more easily. So we can see actually at a glance that if we made all the demand, if we met monthly demand, our profit would be 400,000. But we also have other constraints, so let's put in that. So the total labor hours, again, for each of these units, it would simply be the labor hours per unit times the number of units that we make. All right, and we'll pull that across, and we'll pull this down. There we go, there's our total. Oh, that's not a dollar. I don't want a dollar on that. Let's just make it a number. There we go. Very good. And I also want my production time. I'll call it production hours because it is in hours, as is our constraint. And that's simply equal to time per unit times the number of production units. Okay. We can see pretty clearly that our maximum profit would be 400,000, but we can't achieve that because we're constrained by production hours and we're constrained by labor hours. Now, one of the ways that you could do this would be to simply type in different things, like instead of doing 12,000 mice, maybe I make 10,000, and maybe I make 15,000 keyboards, and maybe I only make 8,000. That doesn't quite get me there. I'll lower this to 8,000 or 9,000. I'm not there yet. Let me lower this to 6,000. There. And now I'm under, if you look at this, I'm under the labor hours, and I meet the production constraint and the labor hours constraint, and I have a profit of 295,650. But I want to use the Excel solver to do a little bit better. So let's go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to type in a couple of constraints, and let's put them right here. So my labor constraint is 10,000 hours, and my production constraint is 1,700 hours. And I'm also going to, just for because I don't want to change my set right here, I'm going to put in my demand constraint. And that's just equal to, let's see, just copy and paste this. And the reason I'm doing this is just so that I don't mess up my, my spreadsheet. So I can keep everything there. Now I'm going to, before I go ahead and go into Excel Solver, I'm going to try some best practices here. First, I'm going to color code some of my things here. I'm going to color code my objective function, that which I want to maximize, as green. I'm going to color my constraints as orange, or I'm sorry, red, light red. And finally, I'm going to, these are also constraints, right? And finally, I'm going to color the cells that I want to move around. I'm going to color those as, let's just call them yellow. So I've got red, yellow, and green, I guess. All right, so I know that when I build my Excel spreadsheet, I'm going to move around these cells, colored yellow. I'm going to objectify my green cell, and I'm going to have constraints around all of my red cells. So let's go ahead and do that in Excel Solver. First things first, if you don't yet have Excel Solver, I already have mine, but if you don't, you want to go to Options, and you want to go to Add-ins, and go to Excel Add-ins, and then you want to make sure that you have Solver checked. I already have mine checked, so we're good to go. Now the solver can be found in Data, and right over here I also have my data analysis spreadsheet checked, and I'm going to go to Solver. Okay, and now what I want to do is I want to enter in all the items of my spreadsheet. So let's start with the objective. So the objective is, in this case, I just want to type in a particular cell, which happens to be H14 for me. So this is the cell I want to change. I want to try and, that's my objective. Now I can maximize it, I can minimize it, or I can set it to the value of. So if I wanted to be exactly at $300,000 worth of profit, I could put that in by choosing value of. But I want to maximize it, so I'm going to keep it calculated on this. Now, which cells am I going to change? This is nice because I can just actually select those cells, and there we go. And we're all done, except that we need to put in the constraints. So to do the constraints, you click on Add, and you do a cell reference. So let's do the easy ones first. I want this cell, which is my total labor hours, to always be less than or equal to, and you can see I have options here, less than or equal to. I could type in my constant, but instead I'm going to put it as a cell. Okay, and I'm going to click OK. I could also click Add, but I just want to show you what happens. Notice that Excel already put it here in the constraints. I'm going to add another one now. The cell reference is here. This is my production hours, total production hours. I want that to be less than or equal to, again, this 1,700. And click OK. And then finally, I'm going to make another one. I want my cells right here. And yes, Excel is smart enough to know that you can select a collection of cells to be less than my constraints right here. And click OK. Now I've got all my constraints in here, and I'm going to click on Solve. When I do that, Solver looks like it has come up with a solution. It doesn't usually take too long. And I can either keep the solver, or I can return the parameters, or whatever. But once I click OK, I have cells that are changed. Notice that Excel has already changed them. I'm going to click OK because I want to keep this. And there it is right there. Excel shows 4,889 mice, 20,000 keyboards, 9,000 USB hubs. And you can see how close we got to meeting the constraints. We used up all of our labor hours, all 10,000 of them. So we can't use up any more. And that was the constraint that we hit. We almost used up all of our production hours, but not quite. So what we might want to do in this case is if we wanted to increase the profitability above 307,000, remember we were at about 295 before. If we want to go to 310 or 400 or whatever, we're going to have to break some of these constraints, like hire somebody else. In this case, it makes some sense, or somehow, yeah, create a little bit of additional labor. Labor happens to be the key constraint here, along with the market. All right, so that's about it for this example. And I wanted you to note that what really takes the time up is in creating that spreadsheet and going through and really taking the time to have the best practices so that you remember, oh yeah, what's my maximum, what's my minimum, and what are all of my constraints. All right, until next time, we'll see you.